Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove. I'm the owner of Transformational Solutions, a life coaching business that specializes in addiction, trauma, and self-destructive behaviors. I'm an author, podcast host, group facilitator, speaker, and co-creator of the online 8-week self-development course, The Visions Program.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, a business entrepreneur, dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare, California's leading dual diagnosis and mental health treatment centers, focusing on comprehensive and immersive treatment experiences with a network of facilities and dedicated professionals committed to providing each and every client the intimacy of care they so richly deserve.
This is the Got Mental Health Podcast, a fun, open, and safe space where we talk to experts, thought leaders, and professionals in the mental health field.
Our goal is to educate, inspire, and empower people to take care of their mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
Join us weekly to hear Arthur talk like this as we talk all things mental health.
Follow us wherever you go to get your podcasts.
And don't forget to rate and review as it really supports our show.
Thanks, guys.
And keep listening to Arthur. Welcome back, everyone, to the Got Mental Health Podcast. My name is Rachel Cove, and I am here along with my partner in crime, Arthur
Mogilevsky, Rachel.
Thank you. Today we are interviewing the wonderful Keith Bradley. Hi, Keith.
Hi.
Keith Bradley is often referred to as the interventionist with a heart. Through his company, Love in Action, Keith approaches interventions from a spiritual perspective. Since 2007, using a model based upon and expanded from the Love First intervention method, Keith has successfully facilitated over 750 interventions with a success rate above 75%. Wow, I had to digest that for a second. Yeah. Keith's passion for recovery, his personal experience recovering from a dual addiction, and his belief that if a guy like him could achieve sobriety, anybody can, allows him to communicate heart to heart with those who are actively suffering from the disease of addiction. After a 32-year career in upper management level of the automotive industry, as a result of volunteer work he was doing in a detox center to maintain his own sobriety, Keith trained under an apprenticed with two of the leading interventionists in the state of Colorado. To date, he has spent more than 20,000 hours working with addicts and their families. Welcome to the show, Keith Bradley. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that bio doesn't do him justice, I gotta tell you. I mean, I've known this guy for a while, so glad to have you here, bud.
Glad to be here, man. Thanks for the invite, both of you.
Wow, what an extraordinary resume.
My wife's a very good writer.
Is any of it true?
Yeah, it's...
if Marty's writing it, it is.
Okay.
But it's been an incredible journey. And I did start in an indigent detox center. And the way it got started is the director, one day, if you were in recovery, you could volunteer there. I started showing up there like I had a job. Not because I was a nice guy, because I didn't obsess about drinking whiskey or doing dope while I was there. It was my window of freedom, where I could work with those guys. And one day the director walked up to me. I'd been doing this for like 90 days. And she said, I know you know about anonymity, and I know you know about the fact that I can't share with you or anybody else that calls in asking about somebody being present there. And I said, yeah. She said, I had a family call today looking for their loved one, and you know him. Would you mind giving this family a call? I said, no, I won't give the family a call, but I'll go find him on the river. And I went down there and found him. Long story short, his first words to me was, his name was Kim, and his first words to me was, Keith, you'd be the last person I thought would ever show up here with a half pint of vodka. He said, what's going on? I said, well, I want to know if you've ever thought about reconnecting with your family. He said, yeah, I've thought about it a lot, and I'd very much like to, but they don't want anything to do with me. I said, you might be wrong about that. I said, here's the deal. We've got complete medical detox treatment in place. And if you're willing to do this, 3 weeks into the program, I'll fly your family out to see you so you can reunite. The only thing I can tell you is when I picked the family up in the airport and brought them back to Greeley, and I watched them reunite with their son and their father, something happened. And I didn't know what had just happened, but I'm alcoholic from head to toe. I knew I wanted more. And that was the way it started. And I just started wanting to repeat what I felt like when I watched them reunite with their family.
What did you feel like?
Sense of accomplishment. I had achieved about everything I'd ever set out to achieve in the automobile business, and nothing felt as good as reconnecting that family with their loved one. And that become pretty standard when they would get a call. They would say, we cannot acknowledge or deny that person's ever been here. And then you bring me the card. I go find the guy on the river and have the same conversation with him. By the way, I did Kim's eulogy 6 years ago. He died with an 8-year coin in his pocket.
Mm.
And that's kind of how the whole deal got started. And then I got lucky. There was a guy that owns a men's treatment center, and a good friend of mine was working for him. And he called me one day and he said, look, your friend told me that I should call you. I said, okay. He said, I want you to come down. I want you to stay all night. I want you to we'll have dinner together. First night we'll play golf the next day. And I just want to hang out with you. I said, okay. I'd been doing these free interventions at that point, probably, I don't know, a year. He said, Keith, you're going to burn out doing free interventions. He said, I don't know anything about your financial situation and don't want to. But he said, we need you. And he set up kind of where I should focus on going, who should I try to connect with conferences and symposiums and that type of thing. And that's what I did the first year that I started. I did exactly what this guy told me to do. It's Bobby Ferguson, is who it was, and he owns Jaywalker's Lodge. After a year, I said, I really don't want to be a therapist. That's not what I want to do. So I got certified in 2 different models of intervention, and I don't use either one of them. I kind of shoplifted from 4 models. I think it does have the underlying foundation of Love First, Jeff and Deborah Jay's book. It just kind of took off from there. I never knew that there was going to be a company. I got the opportunity to do something like 40 interventions in 9 months.
What was your first one like?
The first one that I ever did wound up being an education at a later date that I didn't see coming. It was a family, a local family. It was on the wife. And me and husband, $2, did the intervention. I live in a small town. And back then it was a lot smaller than it is now, because it's grown too. But we got them to treatment and took them up to Harmony, and they completed treatment. And it was about 3 months later, I saw the dad and the $2 in a restaurant locally. And I went over and said hello. And I asked a question I'd never asked again since. How's she doing? They were no longer married. It did not turn out successfully. And that was the last time I ever asked. It's lessons like that that I've learned along the way that I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that my heart ached for these families, and I found out that there's been a lot of times that I referred cases to him, and I show up and deliver the person that I did the intervention on and say, I want you to know I'm delivering you the person that is the most well in this family, much sicker than this person is.
When you say this person, you're speaking to the client, the person who's entering
alcoholic.
treatment.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, because often parents think that their kid is the one with the quote-unquote problem.
Not true.
What is your perspective on that?
The kid becomes their drug.
Fascinating.
And sometimes the kid is 50 years old.
What does that mean the kid becomes their drug? Because as a parent myself, we're all obsessed with our kids. We all want our kids to succeed. We worry about our kids all the time. What does it mean specifically that the kid becomes their drug?
When the obsession causes harm, it's no longer love, it's enabling. The line between love, in my opinion, finding that invisible line between obsessed with your kids and loving your kids and that type of thing, and enabling is one of the most difficult lines for me personally to find with my own kids. They're both in recovery, by the way. 90% of what I do is preparing the family, which usually is 20 to 30 hours of coaching, counseling with all the family members. Nearly every case, there's 20 to 30 to 40 hours spent coaching, explaining the difference to families between ultimatums and boundaries, and how we're going to approach those in the event that we need to, for generally a situation that lasts 2 to 3 hours with the person we're preparing to meet. Most of the work goes in working, coaching, counseling with the family. There's a lot of them that are really hard to spin around in a different direction, you know. I call it knowledge from nowhere. They all have some, you know. I think it's one of the most significant pieces to the intervention process there is, because if they're not well coached and they're not well trained, it becomes counterproductive.
Now, are you coaching them on the intervention that's going to take place? Or are you coaching them on, like, what are you specifically coaching them to do?
Nearly always, if there's a young person involved, we get to the conversation that is, they say, we don't know what to do anymore. And the pat answer usually is, you need to close the checkbook. That's how it starts. And educating them about this individual has no reason to want to get sober. You're paying his rent, you're paying his car payment, you're paying his insurance, you pay his cell phone, you provide him food, you do everything that normal people have to do on their own most of the time, especially with young people. They do it thinking that at least it'll maintain some contact with them, because one of the side effects from addiction is we push the people that mean the most to us the furthest away. And so to counteract that, let me write this check, let me pay your rent, I'm going to take care of you. It's not working.
So obviously that's the first piece of it, right? Where it's performing, honestly, an intervention on the family before you perform an intervention on the client themselves.
Absolutely.
And so there's, in our industry, there's been such a huge push towards family coaching and case management after the member has gone into treatment. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know that for the past couple of years has become bigger, because it's one thing to get the client into treatment and coach the family and helping them get to treatment. But when they leave, they go back to that same environment, that same culture, the same belief system, unless the family is able to get help for themselves. Where do you see the value in that, especially in the past couple of years where that's really been a huge push?
There have been a lot of cases, and keep in mind, when I first started doing this 15 years ago, what treatment was you have a small group, you meet every day, they detox you first, then you have a small group, and then you maybe see a therapist 2 times in the 30 days that you're there. Then they do a hot seat where they tell you your liabilities, the other clients tell them your liabilities and your assets, and then they pat you on the back and say, now go to AA. And they call that treatment. In the years that I've been doing this, I've watched this entire thing evolve into, if we treat the underlying issues, maybe it raises the odds of them not having the need to self-medicate out the other end. Trauma therapy now is a standard in all the reputable treatment centers. 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. In fact, everybody was doing the happy dance when it got introduced,
Right.
because it was actually a solution to what's going on, and it raised what were horrible percentages of success. It increased it when we started doing clinical work.
So it's really about the family component
Okay.
and giving them the help that they need.
One of the things that I frequently do is, and I'm kind about it, but I can't allow them to bring into the process of an intervention that sense of need, that the only way they're going to be able to help him or her is to write a check. And in a lot of cases, the treatment centers have their own family programs. Okay? But before that happened, I would say to a lot of families over the years, and a lot of people were offended by it, and that, look, in order for me to move forward and help you with this intervention, you're going to need to make an appointment with a therapist. If you don't have one, I can give you a recommendation. You're going to need to go to Al-Anon, and you're going to need to prepare for exactly what you're talking about. Because if nothing changes when he or she comes back from treatment, nothing changes. In fact, it's going to get worse from here.
Right. Especially when you're coming from an environment that we've had clients that come through our programs and their spouses are actively drinking or using, but they would say, well, my husband drinks worse than me, so he needs to go to treatment first.
Now, the very last thing you want to happen in an intervention is for them to look at their spouse and say, why are we not doing this on you?
Right.
You know? One of the things that I do is I do a conference call throughout the process. Of course, now with COVID, that's Zoom. And we do Zoom meetings when I'm doing the coaching prior to the event. So I talk to everybody individually that wants to talk to me individually. And the other thing that happens is in those Zoom meetings is I use a letter writing process. And each person reads their letter to the individual we're doing the intervention on. And by the time I get to the family meeting practice rehearsal, which is the day before the intervention itself, I know exactly who's going to read first, I know who's going to read last, and I'm going to know who's got no chance of reading. I know all of that before we ever get there. And I very well may recommend, if you don't agree to see a therapist while they're in treatment, don't waste your money with treatment or intervention, because the family has to get well together. It's the only way they're going to be successful. And I've seen some pretty miraculous things that happen with families, especially now with, like I said, the COVID deal. Nearly all therapists are doing online therapy sessions now. So they can actually sit in their own home and get therapy rather than having to drive into LA and find an office, you know? Same way with Denver or any other state you're in. They can do it in the privacy of their own home. It makes things, it's a lot easier sell for me because you don't even have to leave your house.
I've known you for, how long has it been? Ever since that diner.
I tried to figure it out. I think it's probably 7 or 8 years.
Something like that, right? I've known you for a long time. And I've worked with countless of interventionists, some great, some not great, some in the middle. I hold you in extremely high regard, not because you're good at what you do, but because you really care about the people that you connected with and the work that and you can hear that in your voice and how you're talking about it now. And I mean, the title of your company, the name of it is Love in Action. Can't get any sweeter than that. So
in the book, the foundation of the
Right.
process I use is called Love First.
Right. And so I think also because of the growth of the mental health space and the substance abuse space, you see an extremely large growth in the intervention space as well, where you have, people classifying themselves as interventionists left and right. You just take a 3-day course or whatnot, then you can become a certified interventionist. How can a family, because I get these calls all the time, I don't know where to look, I don't know how, like, they can look at treatment facilities, they can judge to some degree whether they're good or bad based off of what the description they're getting. But as an interventionist, because there's so many of them out there now, how can families really find the best interventionist? What are the questions they should be asking? What should they be looking for?
Well, I'm going to answer your question a different way before
Please.
I answer the question, and that is that through relationships like you and I have, they don't need to look.
Right.
You've got someone that you trust, that you've got longevity with, and that's always the best handoff. They already trust you, or their loved one wouldn't be coming to you.
Sure.
So that's the best source of a referral that you can get. I spend way more time doing tours than I care to of facilities. And the other thing is, it's about the questions they should ask. Are they insured? Do they have references? My wife keeps a file with every card we get, every grateful email that we get, and it all goes into a file. And I tell people when I'm on the phone, if they're not certain about the direction they want to go with which interventionist, I just call 2 or 3 more. All you got to do is Google. Very seldom ever does it happen that I don't get a call back. From the years of being in business for myself, and the years of being in the car business, and the years as an interventionist and as an employer and all of that stuff, I do know one thing that you cannot teach, and that's passion.
Mm-hmm.
You either got it or you don't.
Absolutely.
And I choose to surround myself with people that have passion. I choose to surround myself with people that are positive. A lot of times I feel like the family in the beginning is pissing on my leg trying to convince me it's raining. And
What do you mean by that?
what I mean by that is I'm the very last person they want to be negative in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by pissing on my leg trying to convince me it's raining, I really don't think that we've got a chance of getting him to treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And my reply to that is then I recommend that you not be there. You can write a letter that maybe I can read to your loved one. Because if you're negative, the whole intervention has a negative overtone.
Mm.
And I can't have that. We all have to be focused. Part of the biggest job that I have during the intervention is keeping this thing from getting off its rails.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to keep the focus always on the individual. I can't allow the individual to make his wife the target. Why are we not doing this on you? You know, it has to be about the person we're intervening on. And if there's anybody that will not conform to that, they're likely going to be asked not to be a team member.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever is the best odds of making this work and getting from A to B, being from the intervention straight to treatment, I'm just not going to allow a family to set me up to fail.
Hmm.
And it's not about me, but it's my obligation to the family to make decisions based on doing over 750 interventions and drawing on that experience about what works and what doesn't.
I read that your success rate was 75%. How do you measure that success? Is the success measured by going to treatment? Is it by having long-term abstinence from substances? How would you measure that success?
The only way that I consider an intervention to be successful is going directly from the intervention to treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you stop and think about it, the other 25% that don't go that day 40% of that 25% go within the next 7 to 10 days. You've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that happens, I don't consider that a successful intervention. 75% is based on straight from the intervention to treatment. No, we're not going Monday. In fact, we've got a medical staff waiting on you right now. And we've got a flight here in about 3 hours. But that's what I consider a successful intervention. There's a lot of the families that I work with that maintain contact. I don't do case management. For a couple of reasons. One is I don't have time, and that's a huge responsibility for somebody to take on. Huge responsibility. And I don't want to be that guy that says he's a certified case manager and they can't get a hold of him. Never going to do that. Now the treatment centers, for the most part, are providing with some case management, are providing the family with all of the things that keeps it coming from a third party.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a better win rate that way than it does.
Yeah, it definitely has better outcomes. I think case management has to happen internally. I mean,
Oh, I do too.
you know, I think it's harder for the programs to provide case management services to the family members themselves while they're in treatment, because it would require, you know, there's always this theory, it's like we should create a treatment program for families where while the resident is in treatment, the actual,
There's actually two
right.
that I can tell you about right now.
Oh, that actually do exist?
Yes.
Please, share.
One's the bridge.
Okay, so they have a family program.
That's all they do.
Okay,
That's all they do is work with families, and there's another one in Florida.
that's amazing.
That's amazing.
And
He's a book of resources, by the way.
Good
I've
to know.
sent a lot of people to the bridge.
Where's the bridge located?
It's in Oregon, I think.
Let's get a plug.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a dream of mine.
It's
On the ranch.
On my land,
On
yeah.
your land.
and it's not for alcoholism and drug addiction.
Right.
It's for mental health. It's for family therapy.
So they can go there. They can stay there. Or
Oh,
is
it's
this something-
residential.
Really?
That is incredible.
In addition to that, this is going to sound like I'm really plugging them now, but they have two different programs. They have a 15-day program.
Mm-hmm.
They have a 30-day program. They have a 90-day program. And in comparison to drug and alcohol treatment, it's about half.
Cost-wise.
Yes. And that lets people that don't have a lot of money be able, you know, most everybody can come up with 10 grand. Well, that's what it costs for 2 weeks.
Mm.
And they say, why couldn't I just go to a therapist? And you said, okay, let's just do the math. Basically, if you go to a therapist, how many times are you going to see them? Twice a week? That would be a lot. Hour at a time? How about 10 days, 8 hours at a time?
Mm-hmm.
Or 14 days at 10 hours at a time? I like that a whole lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And oh yeah, by the way, you're not smoking a joint or drinking a beer after you get done with your therapy.
Well, and it coincides with the addict who's currently in residential treatment.
Absolutely.
They're
Absolutely.
in it together.
Let's heal together.
Let's heal together. Yeah.
That is some of my favorite groups to run, is teaching families how to communicate. Like, the healing that occurs is so profound.
I agree with you. And I had a case not very long ago that was a very well-known person. His approach to trying to help direct his daughter's life, who by the way was 32, was all wrong. And I got this girl to treatment and delivered her. And they were one of the families that I said to the father, if you're not going to seek therapy for yourself, I'm not going to move forward. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And my prayer is that you're going to get your daughter back. And my prayer for her is she's going to get her family back. Not the one that is got a GPS on her car to find out where she's at every minute of the day. She's 32. The one that Well, she's dating that deadbeat, and it's just constantly. It make me want to drink too, to watch out the other end of this family healing while their daughter was in 90 days worth of treatment, and getting a family phone call with mom, dad, and daughter. There's no amount of money worth that. That's what we do this for. Their entire family healed. And it takes sometimes long-term treatment. Not only for the addicted person, but for the family too. And with her being in 90 days treatment, it gave them time. Keep in mind, I kept nudging them along and making certain that they were connecting and following up, and they have to sign a release for me, so that I know the truth. If I could have the outcome of every case, it would run parallel with the one that's in my mind. It was absolutely, I think the dog's even better.
I bet.
The healing was amazing.
Dog therapy?
And the healing started when I made the phone call and said, we're on the plane. The family began. I said, now it's you know what you need to do. And I'd really like for you to, it's still early in the day, I'd like for you to do it today and make that appointment. And they did.
What do you feel the families are healing?
Codependency? I hate that word.
Why? I love that word. I feel like
hate
it's at the root of so many issues, underlying mental health issues.
But codependency itself, I don't think is a mental health issue. I think codependency is created by other mental health issues. I don't like the word codependency. That's
Why?
just me. It's a label that everybody uses.
Isn't everything?
No.
You don't think so?
No. And I have families telling, I know I'm probably codependent. They can diagnose themselves.
It's like families saying, I think he's bipolar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get it all the time.
Or borderline.
Borderline.
What I love to do when we're doing a Zoom meeting and they say, I'm pretty certain that he's bipolar, I always say, which one of you diagnosed him with that?
I forgot when you go to business school, you also get your psychiatric degree.
Right. But I like the word enabling. To me, codependency is the extreme side of enabling, where the child becomes their drug. That's total codependency. I've done interventions with people, 4 people. This one family in particular that I'm thinking about, this guy's sister is in Canada. And I called her, said, hey, we're headed over to your brother's house, meet with him right now. She said, well, don't go now, he's at the gym. I said, how do you know that? She said, I'm tracking his car. You're tracking your brother's car from Canada to wherever we were at in the United States? Really? That's codependency. that's the extreme. I also think 97, 98% of every addict or alcoholic that I've worked with has mental health issues. I know in my own case, I had this unsatisfiable need to self-medicate. And I get the underlying trauma treated, and I have no more need to self-medicate, and it's a lot easier for me to get sober. The whole thing about doing clinical work instead of just patting them on the back and saying, I'm going to AA. And I want you to know, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not saying anything negative about that. I just don't think you have to go to treatment and pay for it to get the 12 steps. But I like the fact that it's underlying. And I love the clinical thing think about it in your own case. How much more clinical work are you doing today than you were when you first started? It's an incredible amount. I've watched the whole industry head in that direction. The addict's not always right, and the family's not always right. It's okay to not be right. Let's figure out some place where we can reunite. I can tell you that I'm not very proud of the fact that I lost the right to see my own grandchildren. But that's what had to happen with me. And today, when it made me so angry at the time, that was the boundary my son decided to put in place before I quit.
What a hard boundary to instill.
You know, and the way he did it, they live in a different state, and they'd come to Colorado to see us, and it was 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was making pictures of Bloody Marys. And of course, I started about 7 o'clock in the morning, so 10 o'clock, I'm pretty well slurring my words and got a nod on. And I told him, I said, I'm not feeling well, I'm gonna go lay down for a little while, you know, so I can get refreshed and get back up and start drinking again. When I got back up and come downstairs, he said, Dad, I can't have you come around the kids anymore. He said, it's too unpredictable. He said, I just don't think it's in their best interest. 3 of those grandkids, I was the first one to put a golf club in their hand, teach them how to play golf. Second to the oldest grandson is coming out in June to spend 5 days with me, doing nothing but playing golf with Grandpa. So I've had the experience. I don't want you to think my family's normal. They're not.
I don't think any family is normal.
Not at all. You know, we're the definition of a broken family, but it's about as good as it's ever been. And as it turns out, neither one of my sons were sober at that time. They both have gotten sober as a result of watching what happened with me. It's amazing. And I don't want to get off on this being a speaker meeting or anything, but I'm just telling you that I not only have witnessed families healing together, I've had that experience in my own family. We're all in recovery. My oldest son's wife, my oldest son, his son needs to be, you know, it's right down through the whole list. My youngest son is recovering alcoholic too. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. One of the things that families ask me frequently is, do you think it's genetic? And I said, I think it's so prevalent that it can appear to be genetic. Do I have anything to base that on clinically? No. I don't know whether it is or not. I think it's so prevalent that you can take a room full of 100 people, and if there's one person in there that says they're not affected in any way with drugs and alcohol throughout their entire family, it would be unusual. So I think it's so prevalent that it appears that it could be genetic.
Did you getting sober introduce you to spirituality? Or were you spiritual before you got sober?
Great question. I was born and raised in a Baptist home, a Southern Baptist home.
Wow.
I'm talking about, we did training union on Thursday, prayer meeting on Wednesday, Sunday morning church service Sunday night, 4 times a week.
Can't get more spiritual than that.
And it wasn't spiritual. There was nothing about it spiritual. And I would listen to this guy stand up there and pound on that podium and say, if you drink, or if you lust after your neighbor's wife, or you dance, or you smoke, you're going to burn in hell forever. I'm 7 and I've already done all the above.
Right.
I knew I was doomed. And I would sit in that congregation, and I don't know if you've ever been to a Southern Baptist church or not, but some of them are pretty vocal. You know, I mean, can I get an amen is constantly going on. And then other people start throwing amens in, you know, that weren't even asked for an amen. And I'm sitting there, and I can remember this happening when I'm still in grade school. I'm leaned over and I'm looking at these people and watching this Holy Ghost get all over them, and I'm saying, why isn't that happening to me? Why am I not getting what they're getting? And then my sister got brain cancer. And she spent the last 10 years of her life in a nursing home, in diapers, and never spoke another word. And I made up my mind at that point, if that was God's work, I wanted nothing to do with God. So when I got sober, I was angry with God. I was your client that says, steps don't work for me. and talk to me about God. And my mentor and my sponsor, Leo, God rest his soul, I knew how to talk the talk. I've been around AA, I've been to treatment 6 times, come on, I know. So when we decided we were going to get together, I said, I suppose it's probably time for me to start doing another inventory. And he said, no, we're going to start with the first step. I said, really? I said, I was sober one time 12 years. He said, was is the key. He said, let's see if we can figure out something that can keep you sober from now on. We got to the second step, which, by the way, is my favorite step of all 12. And
me too.
Since that time, I never got it in 6 different treatment centers, and here's why. There's so much stuff going on in step 2. Came 2, we talked about that. Believe in a power that's greater than me. In order to have a need to be restored to sanity, that means you got to be insane. I really didn't think I was all that insane. So there's so much stuff going on in step 2 that it took a guy that was about 5'1" from Holland with a real thick Dutch accent. And I'm so vain that I didn't have hearing aids at the time and needed them. So I have to, when he would talk to me, I'd have to get very close and watch his lips and make sure I was try to filter through the thick accent and all that kind of stuff to hear what he had to say, and he was perfect for me. We stayed in step 2 for 2 years until I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. But we had to identify all of the insanity before I was willing to say, I need to be restored. Then my glitch came. I don't know that I was ever sane, even before I drank or used. So we had to work through that. Step 3 was, to me, as big as wedding vows. Made a decision. Turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand it. I had never made that kind of commitment to God before. See, I'm still angry. If he's a loving God and he does all these wonderful things, why did he give my sister brain cancer? And if he gave her brain cancer, why couldn't she just die? Why did she have to lay there in diapers for 10 years? It was probably about a year into it. Leo looked at me one day and he said, how you doing with that resentment you had towards God about your sister? I said, well, I was going to talk to you about that. I said, my thinking changed. To now, I'm the luckiest guy you know. I'm the only guy that got to be her brother. Without intending to head in that direction, he knew exactly how to get me there. And he let it play out over time. And through the intensive step work we did, he made a recommendation that I see a trauma therapist. Not one of the 6 treatment centers. We all did the hot seat. We all did the assets and all that kind of stuff. And a couple of them, we even painted a cup, That didn't seem to help either. When I got involved with a trauma therapist, I had never said the things out loud that I said to that person. And once I did, I started to heal.
That's good.
And today I don't have a need to self-medicate. I'm almost 2,000 miles from home. Probably 1,500, maybe.
You're
15 or 1,800, probably. I can honest to God tell you that I have not had a thought of a drink since I've been here. And I ate with a friend of mine last night in a steakhouse that the only seats available were at the bar. We both sat at the bar. I've never had one desire to drink, and it got removed when I completed the 3rd step. I completed the 3rd step about the same time that I was going through the trauma therapy. But I'm just going to tell you, I don't fight it anymore. The treatment centers that I refer to today, I told you about this before we started too. A lot of times when I haven't been there before, as I'm walking through, I'm looking for the 12 steps. I'm looking for the 12 traditions. Where y'all keep your big books? Apparently you got them hid. Where's your big books? I want to know that in their spare time, in the evenings when most of them are free, are we going to AA meetings? Are we getting comfortable with the idea of being in the recovery community? Even if you're not going to stay here, can you kind of educate them about what it's all about? I can tell you, for this alcoholic, 2 things saved my life. Alcoholics Anonymous, trauma therapy.
I find it fascinating and appreciate that every time before you do an intervention, you always tell me this. I've centered myself. I've meditated. I'm in a good place. And it's just, that's so amazing that you do that literally before every intervention.
I did it today before we came in here.
Yeah.
And I have found through prayer and meditation, this card file up here, it's tired. But if I take the time on a daily basis to pray and meditate, it seems like it gets rejuvenated. Memory gets better, that type of thing. I had a guy ask me not very long ago, he said, why do you do that every day? I said, it's real simple. I have to. Because if I don't, when my feet hit the floor, there's a fight going on. With whom, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What direction I go? Whoa. And then I got to turn off the noise. With this process of prayer and meditation, by the time we build through the Zoom calls, the conference calls, and the individual calls, and everything, by the time we get to the family meeting practice rehearsal, which nearly always is in a different place than the family meeting practice rehearsal, because we don't want to do it anywhere where the person we're intervening on would walk in accidentally. All of the information that I've gathered to that, I've never been in the house where we're going to do the intervention. I always ask for a picture of the person we're intervening on, because it helps me to focus on what my task is, who it's with, and it kind of gives me a feeling that I kind of already know them, with all the information I've got now. I know what it physically looks like. Before each step of the process, I pray and I meditate. And when it gets down to the day before, I know exactly who needs to go first, who needs to go last. Until we get them delivered to the treatment center they're going to, job's not complete. We don't hand them off to a transport company. I mean, it makes more sense for me to be on the plane with this guy. And nearly all of them, we have a pretty good rapport. It's based on the same theory as Alcoholics Anonymous. It's one alcoholic addict sharing with another alcoholic addict. And the magic takes place. Even though the last thing he intended to do was meet me that day and be told, we've got a flight in 4 hours.
If you could give yourself one piece of advice to younger Keith, what would it be? To the Keith just starting out in this world in your role as an interventionist, what would you tell that young man?
It's not for everybody. You have to physically do one before you can make a decision on whether it's anything you want to do again or not. People asking me when I first started what I did and what I felt like I did for a living was buy coffee and donuts for therapists, or bagels or whatever it was, because I didn't know anybody. And I always try to look for what everybody else is overlooking, and sometimes it's very obvious. There was nobody focused on therapists at that time. To this day, I get referrals from therapists. Somebody I bought coffee and bagels for probably 15 years ago. They've kept my card. They've got an interventionist that they felt good about, and they stick it in the file. I guess the answer to your question would be is find your niche. I probably am on 75 to 90 referral lists in different treatment centers nationwide. You want to know what's ironic? I probably only refer to 10 of them.
I'm not shocked.
Yeah. Well, buddy, I appreciate
Oh, I appreciate the
you
opportunity.
flying out for this. This
Yes.
is amazing. Our first fly-in interview.
I love it.
And you know that I love you and I respect you more than most.
Yes, I do you.
And again, I appreciate you coming out. Again, everybody, this is Keith Bradley, one of the top interventionists in the country. Love in action. His wife is 10 times better than he is.
No question.
Just like you, Arthur.
Yeah, my wife. Yeah, there you go. And anyways, appreciate you coming in. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us. Please follow us on all of the podcast channels, Apple, Spotify, and look forward to having you guys tune in for all the future ones.
Thanks, guys. Thank you,
Thank you.
Keith.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Keith.